Hey everyone, it's CL. So for today's video, I want to talk about a time where I accidentally purchased erotic fiction. And maybe technically I don't really know the difference between romance and erotic fiction. To me, they kind of blend together. But we're just going to use that term lightly. Erotic fiction. I was convinced that I purchased it, and maybe it's just like general romance. I don't really know. To this day, I don't even know. So I want to say it was a period before I started college, before I went off to college, because I remember being at home still. Like, I had my room, and I don't know if it was like during a summer where I was home from school. Like, I can't even remember, you know. But back then we had Borders books, and in California I also had this small little bookshop called like Walden Books, Walden Books, I think it is. And this was before like Amazon and before like book reviews were so prevalent on the internet, you know. When I would search for a book, I would mainly go to the bookstore and just pick up what seemed like had a nice cover. I'd read the back and I would purchase it if it sounded good, you know. So that was basically how I found books, is just stumbling upon them. And I want to say it was either at Borders or Walden Books. It was not at Barnes & Noble. I know Barnes & Noble is now my go-to place. It was not Barnes & Noble. I want to say at this time, Barnes & Noble wasn't nearly as big as it is now. So they didn't have nearly as many locations that were so close to me, you know. So I went to the bookstore, and at this time I was a lot younger, and I was very much into like love and romance and like a girl meeting a guy and falling in love and like cheesiness, you know. And this was also a time before I knew and started writing what like fan fiction was, and that will come into play later. My entire life, whenever I had free time, I would always seek out books, either at the library or a bookstore. So I was at a bookstore, I was looking around the shelves, and I believe I picked up like this new release. It must have been brand new because it was like at the forefront of their shelves, you know. And I remember reading it, and I remember seeing the cover. The cover looked cute, like it had this cartoonish cover, a girl and a guy, and I flipped it over and like read the synopsis. I read the synopsis somewhere on the book, and it talked about how like this nerdy guy kind of falls in love with the hot girl at work, you know, classic nerd versus beauty goddess or whatever, you know, I can't even remember. But one of the things that stood out when I was reading the synopsis is they really packaged it as like a very funny read, comedy, and I thought that that's what it was going to be, like some funny romance that was going to be really cute and make me laugh and really make me fangirl over this love, right? And that was definitely not the case. So I purchased this book, I bring it home, and I start to read it, you know, and I'm like, of course when you go into a book, there's like build up. So they introduce this guy. He's like this nerdy tech guy, and he has no fashion sense, and he's like awkward, I guess, and he's labeled as like a geek, you know. And then they had like this supermodel, stereotypical supermodel girl, and somehow, some way, they're on a plane that crashes on an island, and they have to like fend for themselves. And I just remember going into this book being so hopeful, and as I started reading it, I realized very quickly that it was not what I expected. And when I was reading it, I very quickly realized that I must have purchased porn on accident. Like, it went so quick. I swear to you, it was like the first handful of pages, they're introducing these characters. Then they get in a plane crash, they're on this island, and all of a sudden they're already hooking up. And it wasn't like a cute hookup, like, oh. And I just remember it going so downhill just from my expectations as opposed to what it actually was. And it was very cliche, and it was like, of course the girl was this 10 out of 10 person. She looked like a model. She had the biggest tits ever. And then you have this guy. He's supposed to be the geek, but of course there's nothing geeky about him except he looks really hot, and he has a huge dick. Like this is like stereotypical what you expect trashy erotic fiction would be, I guess. And mind you, I do have to give a full disclaimer that I did not finish reading this book. I barely read any of it because I reached certain points and I was like, wait, what the heck am I reading? And I started to flip through, and like, I just recall a lot more sex than I was anticipating in the raunchier sense, and maybe I'm wrong. But mind you, I didn't read it. Like, I had to abort this book very quickly for different reasons. Now, I don't consider myself a prude, but what I would say is the reason why I had to get rid of it so quickly is because I was at home with my parents, and I have 3 brothers. Then they're not the type of brothers that respect your privacy. They absolutely enter your room without knocking. They will go through your stuff when you're not there. If you had a diary with a cheap lock on it, it would be broken. Like, they would go through all of your stuff. And I could not have my brothers finding this book. I could not have anyone finding this book and reading that I was like reading sex or something. I would just be humiliated, especially because in my mind I can just envision my brothers finding the book and then like being very loud about it. They would follow me around the house and just like read the most raunchiest passages out of it and then be like, you hear what I just read, Mom? This is what CL's reading. Did you hear what I just read? Like, in my mind, I could very much see that happening because I know my family, right? I know my brothers, and I was like, I need to get rid of this book. I cannot finish reading this book. I can't go any further. I have to get rid of it. So I aborted this book very quickly, and maybe it was a good book. Who knows? I barely read any of it. And I had to think, like, I felt very guilty. This was at that time where I love books, and I felt very guilty, like, throwing it away, you know, like damaging a book. I was very careful not to damage books, and I had to get rid of it somehow, but I couldn't donate it because I was worried that like some child would get their hands on it because the cover looks like a cartoonish cover, and I was just worried that some person that's not age appropriate would get their hands on it and be exposed to something that they're not ready to be exposed to, right? So that was one of my fears, so I couldn't donate it, so I ended up just throwing it in the trash. And I felt guilty at first, but then I was like, no, that book is trash. I'm gonna throw it in the trash. So I threw it away. I got rid of it. But years had passed. And I guess back then I was pretty innocent, you know. I mean, romance to me back then was very innocent and a classic romance, you know. It wasn't like nowadays, like, hey, if you put my dick in your mouth, I'll tell you I love you, you know. Like, it's so different nowadays. And of course, since then, I have been exposed to fan fiction, and everyone and anyone who's ever read fan fiction or have written fan fiction, you know that fans come up with the most insane, crazy, raunchy, sexy stories ever. And a lot of them are really good at writing it. So, but even then, even with fan fiction though, I thought the romance element was way better than the romance in this book. But maybe I'm wrong, I didn't really read it. But yeah, so you're like, CL, what book was it? I want to know what book it was. Okay, so I want to repeat that I barely read any of this book. And I skimmed through it, I flipped through it, and I got rid of it. So if you have read this book and I'm recalling memories that like don't match up, like, oh, that's not what happened, it's because I barely read any of it. But the book was nerd in shining armor. And I swear to you, when you see the cover and when you read the synopsis, it sounds very cute and innocent and romantic and cheesy. And it wasn't. And then even today, I even went out to Goodreads. Now we have Goodreads and we have all these reviews online. And on Goodreads, I want to say it like won an award for like the most disappointing story. And reviews are hit and miss. Like, some people liked it, so a lot of people didn't like it, and people kind of reiterated what I said as well. Like, it was very cliche, like the geeky guy wasn't really a geeky guy. Like, I think that's what drew me in as well, because I really, really like intelligent guys. Like I like smart guys. That's just my thing, you know. They don't need to have a six-pack. They don't need to have model-esque hair, you know. You can be bald and I still think you look hot if you have a really intelligent mind, you know. That's just the way I am. And then even in the reviews that I was reading, people were like, I had to force myself to read this. The geeky guy was not really geeky. If you stripped away the fact that he was like in technology as his like work, you know, he wasn't like geeky at all. He was like a model. Like they pretty much described like a male model, you know. So even the reviews, after reading the reviews again, I don't feel bad about it. Like I do not feel bad that I threw this book away, that I didn't really read it, you know, because it sounds like a very disappointing book. But if I purchased that book nowadays, I think I would finish it for the sake of finishing it. So knowing how it starts and ends, like having that full story. Like nowadays I have a really hard time not finishing something, not knowing how something ends. Like that really bothers me. So absolutely I would finish it if I had that book again. Would I spend money on it? No. But if I had it for free, I would definitely, you know, read it. And as far as like what would I do with it after? Would I keep it? I think it would depend on how good or bad it was. If it was just horrible, I absolutely would get rid of it somehow. You all know that I have tried to read romance again, and I just don't like it. Like I don't know what it is. I haven't found the right one yet, but so far I just don't like it. It doesn't seem very romantic. You can have a lot of sex in your book, but it has to have a purpose, you know. A lot of what I read is not purposeful, and it seems like it's the extra stuff that's going on that's not related to sex is just filler. So yeah, I'm still on a quest to find like a really, really good romantic book, but I won't give up on it. So yeah, that is my story of when I accidentally purchased erotic fiction. You know what? Someone who's really good at book genres, please tell me what this book is classified as. Like, is it general romance? Is it erotic fiction? Like, I don't really know. I'm curious. Like, I don't know the lines anymore between romance and erotic fiction. Like, to me, it all just blends together. Like, I don't know the separation of the two. So anyways, that is my video for today. Please let me know if you have purchased erotic fiction on accident before, if you just stumbled across it. Let me know down below in the comments your story, because I'm curious. I'm sure this has happened to more than one person. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later.